Okay, so welcome back to another Give Adventures, and Jim here. Today I want to just show you how I rough or flesh a beaver. Lots of different videos out there that guys are showing. A couple of tid points that I like to point out is I like to use a buckets to catch everything that's coming off, and I wear two aprons. I wear just a regular apron and then a heavier secondary apron, and the reason I do that is I've ruined a lot of good shirts fleshing because it seems to seep through. So by doing that, I'm good to go. Now, depending on the size of the beaver, depends on how you're going to do it. So in a smaller beaver, I flesh basically everything with the dull side, very little of the sharp side. And basically this is my necker, and I just push it off. Now you can see the excess sawdust from the drumming, and I'm just using the dull side at roughly a 90-degree angle, and I'm just pushing off the fleshings. Now you have to be careful because small beavers have thinner leather and they'll tear if you're not careful. And I try to do it systematically, starting at just behind the ears and pushing down. If I feel my knife sliding like that, I take a second and clean off the excess fat that's causing that to happen. And you can see as I'm fleshing, when I'm done, there'll be no sawdust left on the pelt. You don't want to have sawdust on a finished pelt. It turns it into like sandpaper, and the graders hate it. When I get down close to the tail here, sometimes I'll switch over and just use my regular knife because I can tear it here easily, so I just trying to be careful, trying to give it as much cleanup as I can. Okay, so now I have a strip right down the middle of the back. I turn it sideways and I'm going to flesh out now. I'm just easily fleshing out to the edges. And that's when you get closer to the edges, that's where you want to be a little careful. And I just kind of turn it in like a circle, and I just push everything off. Always working from the center out. There's a leg here. Just carefully work around the leg. Smaller beaver, you can just push everything off. Larger beaver, I'll show you in a second, you do it kind of a different way. I'm just being gentle here. I'm not using a lot of force. Push the leg in. I'm kind of careful when I'm doing this with my scraps so that I don't have to bend over and clean everything up at the end. Okay, so I'm trying to work smarter, not harder, and what I'm trying to do here is catch everything in pails underneath me as I'm fleshing. And the little bits that I don't catch, just take a second to clean up. Now I take the ears off of every beaver that I put up. I'm putting them up for the commercial fur trade. And you don't need the ears. And this is when I switch over to my sharper knife. And I usually cut the ear, the butt of the ear cartilage off. At this stage, it makes my job easier when I go to board it. And I cut it off so that I can pass the ear butts through the holes. So let's see, I've cut the earbuds off. Now I just have this left to do. I'm working from the center out, and basically for this whole beaver, I never used the sharp side once. And you can pretty well do that to a large, medium beaver for the most part. You don't have to use a sharp knife. So the extra little bit of the sawdust that I used earlier is allowing it to catch fat and that I'm taking off, and it keeps it nice and clean. Not using a lot of force, more of a steady push all the time to get it all done. I always keep it, bringing it back up so it's close to me, so I'm working more vertical than hunched over like a dog. And there you go. Didn't take long to do that beaver up. He's ready to go. I hang him up normally by the nose like so. Careful to make sure there's no exposed skin for the fur sticking out. Now when I do a larger beaver, it's a different process because I have to use a much bigger, or I have to use a sharper tool because the gristle on it's a lot harder. Okay, so again, get it by the nose on the end of the board. I center it up, take out any slack. Now I switched to my sharp knife. Started with the ear here. Oop. What I use my little piece that I can push my belly on. And then you get a feel for it after you've done a few. And you're shaving, with a shaving action, you're shaving down the saddle. When it slides like that, you'll see me take a second and clean off my knife. And I start right behind the ears like that, and I go right down to the base of the tail, pulling it back up to me so I can keep working straight. I center the beaver on it, and it's a shaving action that you learn. Of course, with bigger beaver, you're always watching out for old scars and bites. It's going to happen. But like anything in life, you try something new. It takes a little bit of experience to get comfortable with it. When you get to the haunches of the back, I'll sometimes switch back over to my dull knife. And then I just push it down because there's basically a layer of skin that there's nothing underneath. So I push that off until it starts to roll again. Again, I keep pulling it up to me. When it gets to that stage again, I got over that little section, then I go back to the shaving with the sharper tool. You get a feel for it, and you're trying to shave off all of the fat and gristle right down to the skin. And after you do a few, you'll see. If you're not careful, sometimes you leave quite a bit of material here at the rump, especially at the base of the tail here like this. It's a thicker, heavy gristle. So you just got to take your time. And again, I can go right down to the edge, but you got to be careful right here. And I like to just switch out a lot of times and use my beaver knife and clean up that edge. So that's the piece. Now I have a complete strip right down the back, and I turn it sideways, centering it, again taking the sharper tool, and more often than not, this is where you'll start running into old bites and scars. So you have to be a little bit more careful here. And I do it like a circle. I just keep working it around, peeling the pieces down. So doing this, there's an old scar right there. Doing this, you learn where you have to shave and where you cut and where you push. Probably the hardest spot is right behind the ears, going up towards the front leg. That little section in there is really hard, and then the other really hard spot is at the base of the tail here. So I'm always watching for scars. If I see a scar, I don't shave it down as tight. I'd rather leave a little extra and work on it on the board than push my luck and rip it open again. So the more you do, the more you learn how to work this, the more comfortable you'll get knowing where to shave it and where you can push it off. You always want to keep it straight and not bunched up. If it bunches up on you, that's where it's going to cut a hole. You'll cut a hole in it. So keep it laid out in front of you, nice and flat. Good idea to give it a quick brushing before you start. I drum mine, so I don't think there's anything that's going to cause the fleshing knife to cause a bump. So if there's a piece of dirt, a burr or something stuck in the on the fur side, it can make a hole in it with the draw knife when you're pushing, especially when you're shaving. When you're pushing, not so bad. When you're shaving, a different story. See? So now I've switched to my pushing. And I generally push out the middle of the flanks first, right down to the edge. The idea of catching everything below you like this, what I do with my buckets, then it's ready to go. It's probably one of the best Martin and Fisher baits out there. See, there's another old scar. I got to be careful there. Now this side's a little bit hard, so I quickly switch over to my sharper knife and shave. And there might be just a little area like that. Once it's cleaned up, again, I bring it up close to me. Sometimes it's just a piece of foam. It's pretty dirty now. But it's just used so I can rest my belly on it. And it stops it from pushing off, rolling off, sliding down. I don't get wickedly concerned about the corners, the edges of the fur. I'll catch that when I put it on the board. Just want to cake the majority of it off. Same as around the leg holes. You can see it's coming out pretty clean here. And I just not using as much force. I'm pushing here push that all off. There's a lot. Maybe I'll come back and clean it up. But again, I'll catch that when I'm fleshing it on the, or putting it on the table. If I want to clean up the legs, I can drop it down like so. And come back over the legs like this. But I'm going to trim that up pretty good when I get it on the board. So I'm not 100% worried about it. So I've got a quarter of the beaver done. I flip it again to the other side. Go back to my sharp knife. Again, I'm shaving. There's a layer of fat here that you want to get past that's heavy, a heavy saddle. You want to get through that by shaving it. When you get closer to the edge like that, where I'm kind of stopping, I can feel the difference and I know I can push it off. But like a lot of things, once you've done enough, you start getting the feeling for it. When I'm shaving, I don't usually use my little belly piece, because when I'm shaving, it's not, I'm not putting a lot of force and it doesn't want to slide away because I'm actually cutting it off. The only thing I watch for is when my knife starts to slide, I quickly stop for a second and clean it up. Okay, coming up towards the front leg here. As you get used to this, your strokes will get longer. Okay, the hardest spot to do is right here at the top of the head, between the leg and the head, between the ear, the eyes and the ear here. And you got to again watch for scars in this area, because chances are if they have scars in one area, they'll have other scars. I'm not sure where I'm at. I take my knife and clean that up real quick. Go back in. Now I'm being very careful when I'm close to the leg here, because you can easily put a hole in it. And the optics, it doesn't look good. Okay, I can spin it back sideways here. And I know I'm at the sage here where I can push this off. You can see the heavier, whiter fat, and then you see the leather right away. It's nice and clear when you're done. When I start getting stretched out like that, pull it back up to me. Trying to keep my body straight as I can. If I see a blob of grease like that come out, just quickly take a paper towel, clean it up. Okay, so you can see how I've cleaned up the front leg here. Gonna continue down. I've never really been too concerned about the nipples unless it's a nursing female where you get a great big blob of nipple coming out. And I said, the more you do, the more you're going to get comfortable knowing where you push and where you shave. As I say, a lot of people, your first 100 are practice, and you start kind of figuring it out. Your next 100, you get pretty good at it, and then after that, you should know what you're doing. And different times of the seasons, beavers are going to be different. It's a heck of a lot more fun to flesh a winter beaver than it is to flesh a fall beaver, or compared to a spring beaver. They all have kind of different characteristics. The nicer that big white saddle. Now here's where I use the sawdust from the drumming to clean off my bean a little bit if I see it getting dirty. Okay, so I've done this beaver kind of like a crossways. I'll go back down, finish off the back leg. There'll be a section here that I'll want to use the sharp side. And again, this is where you kind of watch out for scarring. Beavers are very, very territorial. And if they overpopulate, a lot of times they're going to get a lot of bite marks in them. Not a lot of fun. This guy has a scar right here. And scars aren't really damage that a trapper does. Bite marks and scars, but they count in the grading process. So if you send a beaver in and you never put a hole in, but it's got a bunch of scars in it, it's still going to grade as a damaged beaver. And it's always the percentage. How much one bite mark is okay. 3 or 4 is getting to be a slight damage. When it gets to be like 10 or 15 bite marks, it'll end up being as a damage. It's always percentage of what it's going to dress. Scars don't dress very good in the tanning process. They can make holes. Not always. Sometimes they heal up good and they don't. But a lot of times if they're fresh enough, there's a hole in the pelt. Easy to fix, but again, it's labor that's involved. So when people buy them, they buy them cheaper because they know they got to put in that labor into them if they're fixing them up for garments or shearable beaver. That's where it goes. I like to rough skin simply because in the fall I can clean skin, I can rough skin, I can flesh them on a beam, I can flesh them on a table, I can do it any way, but the method I like is this because I rough skin my beaver, I dry them, rough skin them, put them in the freezer, and I can get to them when I have more time and when the conditions, like in my part of the world, usually January, February are very cold and you don't really want to be out too much. It's just nasty. So putting out beaver for me is a great pastime when it's nice and warm in my shop here. And I get them ready to sell. I'm right by the lake here and it easily pushes off if you know. Now I could go faster, but I'm trying to talk and walk at the same time here, so it slows you down a little bit. But normally an extra large, double extra large beaver takes about half an hour to flesh off nicely. Okay, just the one side left to do here. When you see a scar, you want to be a little more careful around it. Of course, it's always a little thicker, the leather, because it's a scar and it's built up a bit. But if you're not careful, you can kind of push right through it, which you don't want to do. Make a hole. When you're freezing beaver, if you're going to freeze them for any amount of time, you want to double bag them. If you're only going to do it for like a month or so, it's a bit easier. But I highly recommend that you dry them before you put them in the bag to freeze them. In Canada here, our milk comes in plastic bags. So one of the best bags for beaver, to freeze beaver in, are the milk bags. Use them all the time. Now with all the no plastic thing, it's harder and harder to get plastic bags. So it's kind of funny, but milk bags work really good here. If you don't have milk bags, You want a heaviest bag you can get, and then you want to double it. That's going to give you your best results. And there we go. That's the last little bit here. Pushing it off. Finish it with my knife. Bit of a dry spot by the lake here. That's okay. And there you go. So it comes out nice and clean, ready to go, and the next step would be boarding. So there you go. Flesh beaver. You can tell I'm left-handed because I push it all more in the left pail.